Welcome to Monday Musings with the Blended Mama, gentle encouragement for busy women finding calm in the chaos. I'm Teresa, and this is a quiet place to pause at the start of your week. No pressure, no productivity lecture, just a few minutes of perspective and one small step you can carry into the days ahead. I'm really glad you're here. Now, last week we talked about rest, and today's episode might also step on some toes. Again, stepping on my own as much as I am anyone else's. Um, but today we're going to be talking about the way that we speak to ourselves. And I can tell you from personal experience, I have not always spoken to myself very nicely. And I would hazard to guess that that is most women these days, at least at some point in our lives. I'd like to think that we are learning from that and hopefully sharing that with the next generation to be different and to really focus on how we speak to ourselves. But that is what we're going to be talking about today. One thing I've noticed, at least in the season I'm in, my comparison, and we kind of talked about it a little bit last week too, but my comparison to others isn't really with other women. It's comparing to the old me, right? The past Teresa, the pre-perimenopausal Teresa, the Teresa who could juggle all the things, who could move faster, think faster, recover faster, produce more, right? The Teresa who could run at full speed and still somehow feel steady. And yes, I used to run, like actually run, not professionally. I'm not that fast, was never that fast, but I did run a marathon one time and then I stopped running. Um, but when I look at the season I'm in now, that voice in my head, also side comment. My husband says he doesn't have one of those voices. I don't understand like people who don't have a voice that talks to them in their head. So whenever I talk about this with him, he just looks at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I do not experience that. So it is interesting. But anyway, back to what I was planning to talk about. So I have an inner voice, and it is definitely a strong inner critic. Um, and it says to me, you should be able to handle this. What is taking you so long? Why didn't you do this already? Or how could you have forgotten again? Right? Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not, right? But honestly, no matter how it shows up, when it is that inner critic and not just like the nudging of, you're probably doing something wrong, right? Like I feel like that's different. But like the inner critic that is just judging everything you do, it's exhausting, right? Because it definitely doesn't just show up once. It repeats itself ad nauseum all day when a task takes longer than expected, or when brain fog is slowing things down, when I realize I can't juggle as many moving pieces as I used to. And one place for me this is definitely showing up right now is in my business, right? So I am a planner coach and I work with women to help them find calm in the chaos. And that is through paper planners because yes, we live in a very digital world, but if it is not in my face right now, I am not going to remember it. So I literally have a planner beside me all day long. I have a personal planner, and then I have one separate for work where I am just logging what happened that day, notes from meetings and action lists and all those sorts of things because frankly, I was dropping balls and they were not always balls that could bounce. And if you haven't seen the analogy of the rubber ball versus the glass ball, right? You need to know which one you can drop, right? But right now in my business, it's hard, right? There was a season where I was able to manage all the tasks and a lot more than what I'm doing now, and scheduling content across multiple platforms and creating unique content across all of them, writing blog posts frequently, recording YouTube videos, sending emails and managing communities. And I could do it quickly and efficiently and it just happened, right? And now I definitely have to be more intentional. I can't show up everywhere the way that I used to. I haven't done a YouTube video and I can't tell you how long. And even the things that I do choose to do require more planning, more focus, more intention. And that shift can feel really frustrating if I measure it against the past Teresa. But here's the thing I want to remind myself as much as I'm reminding you that comparing yourself to a previous version of yourself is still comparison. And comparison can quietly drain your energy, although frankly, sometimes it's loudly draining my energy. Um, but when we've been reading The Lazy Genius Way this quarter, right? We've been reading it all year so far, although we are wrapping it up here soon. But um, there was a quote that really kind of stopped me in my tracks, and she said, "Without affection for ourselves, without softness on the inside, without being kind to ourselves, we will always be tired." And when I hear that, I'm not just thinking like physically tired, but I'm thinking internally tired, mentally tired, just everything drained, right? And that kind of tired, that kind of fatigue comes from fighting yourself all day long. And if I'm honest, that's what comparison does for me, right? It turns every task into proof that I'm not who I used to be. And so instead of recognizing that I'm simply in a different season, I'm judging, right? So when I take the time to just step back and realize and acknowledge you're not where you were, and that's okay, it really helps change the outlook, right? So part of it for me right now is changing hormones, right? It's horrible. Perimenopause sucks. They did not talk about this when I was growing up. So if you are not perimenopausal yet, just know it's coming and it is unpleasant. Part of it right now for me is just life in general. There's just a lot going on, shifting responsibilities, a lot of travel, and not always fun travel. Right? And sometimes it's just that our capacity naturally changes over time as we age, and midlife is different than your early 20s, right? But growth in these seasons doesn't always look like doing more. Sometimes that growth is just adjusting your rhythm. It's acknowledging where you are and learning how to move forward in the season that you're living in today. So one thing that has helped me with that process, because it is a process, it is a journey, I'm not at the end of it. There are definitely still days that I'm way too hard on myself, but what I like to do now and what is helping me is doing a weekly reflection. So I usually do this um, somewhere on a Saturday or a Sunday, usually before I sit down to do my plans for the week ahead. I reflect on the week behind. Um, because in my head, it will often feel like I didn't do enough, right? That voice is definitely telling me I should have done more. But if I actually sit down and look at what I did this week, and because I'm daily logging, because I am writing it down, I literally can see all the things that I've done, right? So when I sit down to look at it, I do see something different, whether that's emails sent or decisions that I made or meals that I cooked or hard conversations that I navigated or projects that got completed, moments that got handled, progress, momentum was made. I'm able to see that. So sometimes I will add, when I look at my planner, I'm actually surprised at how much I moved through that week because, again, that voice is telling me I didn't do enough. But when I sit down and look at it, it's not just tasks, right? It's not just checking things off of to-do lists, but it's overcoming mental challenges. It's making decisions. It's doing that hard emotional work. And those things count too, and they add up. So one part of that for me is actually highlighting that progress, right? Not the productivity, not just the check boxes at the list at the front of my week, right? But progress. So literally taking a highlighter and marking the things that helped me move forward, even if they feel small. Because our brains tend to focus on what is left. What are the things that didn't get checked off? What didn't happen? What still needs attention? But that highlighting of progress helps us to see the truth of the week, that we actually did more than our brain might want to acknowledge. Another thing I like to do, and that is helping me stay focused during the week, is writing an affirmation on my weekly layout during my planning. That helps keep me focused during the week. So it's not a pressure field goal, it's a grounding statement, something that reminds me of who I want to be in the middle of the week ahead. So something simple like I am steady and capable in the season, or I am allowed to move at a sustainable pace. I'm showing up with intention and grace. I'm doing enough for the season I'm in. It doesn't have to be anything complicated or grandiose. It just needs to be something that keeps you mentally focused on where you're wanting to be. And when I write that affirmation in my planner at the beginning of the week, it really kind of changes the tone on how I approach everything that follows. Because instead of measuring success only by output, I'm also reminding myself of how I want to show up internally. And that small shift can make a big difference when the week gets busy. Another thing, and it kind of goes along with those, is focusing on momentum instead of perfection. Not asking myself, did I hit the exact goal? Did I produce at full capacity? Did I outperform what I did last month? But instead, I'm asking myself, did I move? Did I take a step forward? Did something shift? Movement in business might look like just starting a conversation or making a post or showing your face somewhere online. It might not be huge progress, but it's forward motion. And movement in personal life can be just as simple. Taking a purposeful, intentional 5-minute walk, 10-minute walk, stepping away from your desk so your brain can reset, taking a breath before reacting and responding. Those kind of movements count too, even the small ones. Now let's do a little bit of planner reflection. I enjoyed that exercise last week, so we're going to do that again this week. So if you are somewhere safe, if you are driving, do not do this, but if you are somewhere safe, go ahead, grab your planner, or maybe you're a journaler like me. I do my planning in my journal, so yes, I am a planner, but it's not a traditional planner layout, right? But whatever it is that you do, grab it, open it up to your current week, and let's do a couple of things. Now, again, you don't have to do all the things. Do the one that speaks to you. And if none of these speak to you, then I encourage you to really kind of ponder what we've talked about today and find something that does fit what we're talking about. So here's the first option. Look at the past few days and highlight one thing that you accomplished or moved forward on, something that you made progress on, even if it feels small. Literally grab your highlighter and swipe it over it, right? Maybe it would be helpful to write down one self-critical thought you've been repeating and then rewrite it kindly, right? Reword it. So instead of what's taking you so long, maybe it needs to be this season requires a different pace and that's okay. Another option at the beginning of the week, or if today is Monday. So for me, it's the beginning of my week. I start my weekly plans on Mondays. That might have been yesterday for you if you start your weekly plans on Sunday. There's no right or wrong way. But whether you do that today or you do it the next time you're sitting down to do your weekly plan, write a short note to yourself. How do you want to feel by the end of the week? Do you want to feel steady, calm, focused, encouraged? How do you want to feel? And let that feeling guide your pace for the week ahead. Okay? Because kindness changes that sustainability. When we fight ourselves all day long, everything feels heavier. But when we allow ourselves to move at the pace of the season we're in, something shifts. We stop trying to outrun our capacity and we start working with it. So if you've been hearing that internal voice lately, the one comparing yourself to a past version of yourself or comparing yourself to someone else, let this be a gentle reminder that that version of you served her season. The version of you now is serving this one. It might be a different pace, it might be a different rhythm, but it's still moving forward, and maybe even moving forward with more wisdom than before. If this episode felt like a mirror in the best way, hopefully, I'd love for you to follow this show so that you don't miss what's coming next. If you'd like encouragement like this delivered straight to your inbox each week, you can sign up for my email list. The link is in the show notes. You will get reflections, planning ideas, and updates about upcoming book clubs, community events. You'll also find information in the show notes about our upcoming book clubs and links to some of my favorite planning products. Until next time, friend, keep planning with purpose, coordinate that chaos, and I'll be right back here next Monday to meet you where you are. Have a great week.